Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars, and today we are going to review Rico Rodriguez. Now, this is the guide that nobody asked for, nobody wanted, but you know what? I'm doing it anyways because I'm a big fan of this guy, and I think he's been massively undervalued. So if you're somebody who has been Rico rolled and found yourself in possession of one of these guys and you weren't quite expecting it and you don't know what to do with them, hopefully this guide can help you figure out how he can fit onto your team and what you can do with him. So first of all, if you're not familiar with Just Cause, it's an action-adventure game placed in a non-specific country where Rico is the main hero who overthrows dictators and blows stuff up, and it's honestly like a really light-humored sort of game that's just a lot of fun. You don't take it very seriously, you just jump in and have a lot of fun. So honestly, it's an amusing game, it's a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed playing it. So seeing Rico come to Final Fantasy Brave Exvius was kind of a surprise to me, but also a pleasant one, to be sure. So, without further ado, let's look at some of his passive abilities. These are what are going to help determine his utility in fights just generally. So first of all, he has Man-Eater and Machine Killer. So these are his killer passives that are going to help him take down specific enemy types. And so I like to make note of these because whenever I'm setting up for a new trial or a new event or something, I like to look out for those units that I have that have these passive killers that can help me against these bosses. It's got 30% attack and defense, and he has dual wield, which is awesome. His other passive abilities, he has impact resistance, which makes it so that he has a chance of ignoring fatal damage when his HP is above 10%, and I've noticed that this procs a lot. Most of the time when he should die, he does not die, and it is awesome because it allows you to kind of cheese past mechanics or thresholds or things like that that would normally kill you, and then you can just bowl right ahead anyways and take out the boss or whatever it is that you happen to be doing. His next passive is Steady Hand, which gives him 30% attack when equipped with a gun and another 30% when attacked with a fist, which means that most of the time you're going to be using his innate dual wield to wield both a gun and a fist, and we'll get a little bit into the builds and how you can do that in a bit. But altogether that equals 90% attack when you have a fist and a gun equipped, in addition to the 30% passive that we looked at before. Master Saboteur is nice because it gives him a little bit of evasion, so you could potentially build him into an evade tank, or it just helps his survivability. And he has some really important status ailment immunities to Blind, Sleep, Confuse, and Petrify, with Confuse and Petrify being some of the most obnoxious ones. He also has plus 30% MP passive, and he recovers 5% MP per turn. So these are all pretty run-of-the-mill. Plus 90% attack total is decent for characters at this tier of play. There are characters with better passives, but honestly this is about what we might expect from a unit like this. So these are what I would consider to be his support abilities. They're abilities that you might use sometimes to help yourself out, to help synergize with your team, but they're not really like his bread and butter abilities that you're going to be using often. So the first two are Glass and Homing Grenades. And these are 45% AoE, attack and magic, or defense and spirit breaks. So these are really handy if you happen to need Rico for damage, but also to help supplement with the breaking as well. So he has that in a pinch, and I've noticed that it synergizes really well with Roberta, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And this is what these look like. So we have, oh, where'd they go? Losing myself. Glass Grenade. I'm pretty sure they have similar animations. Yeah, Glass Grenade, and it does damage, so if you were taking this into something like Intangier, the new Intangier trial, that would be a mistake, because if you broke the boss you would wake him up and piss him off, and then you would probably die. So, you know, it does damage, so just keep that in mind. Now his next ability is called Slingshot Boost. This does damage to one enemy, and it increases your physical damage against humans by 75% for 2 turns. So what that effectively means is that your following turn, you're going to get a bonus of 75% damage against human targets, and that stacks with the 50% that he has as a passive as well. So he's actually really excellent at taking down human opponents, which is extremely true to the game because you can slingshot into people and knock them over, and then blow them up. Like, it's, you know, it totally makes sense for his kit. But it is kind of a bummer because you only get it for a single turn after you use it. So it looks something like that. and then on the following turn, oh, see, it actually applied it on the second hit. So it does a little extra damage for the hit itself if you're dual wielding, but you only count on that for one turn. Now, Tether is a single target stop infliction with a little bit of damage. This is another ability that you are probably not going to use. It's single target, and I don't know, stop is useful in the arena, but there are a lot of people with Ayakas or people that can resist or cleanse it or whatever. So I don't know, not that useful, but it's there if you need it. And now his take cover skill is a full recovery to himself, and he removes himself from battlefield for 2 turns. So what that enables him to do is to sneak away from the battle and fully recover. You don't need anybody to heal him or anything like that. And yeah, he'll come back in a couple turns. This is great if you want to cheese a mechanic that would otherwise kill him, like Bahamut's Mega Flare or something like that. Like, you could just sidestep the whole thing and then come back and beat up the dragon later. So just as an example, I don't see it being used a ton, but it's there when you need it. Now, the 3 abilities that I would classify as his damage abilities, the first one is Reeling Kick, and honestly this is one that you're probably not really going to use. It's a jump skill. He doesn't really have anything that supplements jumping abilities, and it honestly doesn't do that much damage, but you know what, it's cool. It's just Rico being himself, so you know what, we don't we don't really care. It's cool. It does a fair amount of damage, but it's not really what you care about with Rico. Now, the next 2 abilities are the ones that you're going to be using a lot with Rico, and I'm going to just jump out of this battle again so I have some more turns so that I can show what I'm talking about. So the first one is Triple Spray. Now, Triple Spray is a unique ability because it's kind of like King, the 4-star unit from, I believe, Final Fantasy Type 0. This ability attacks 3 times to random enemies, and so it can randomly attack 3 different enemies. It can attack 1 enemy twice and then a second one, or it can attack 1 enemy 3 times. The cool thing about this is that it will all go on the same target if there's only 1 target in front of you. So you can see with this dummy here, it will only chain up on the dummy because there are no other targets for him to hit, and it is a very long chain. That was an 83 hit chain, 84 hits in total, and with a combined 1.5 for each of them, that equals 4.5 damage modifier, which is pretty good, but it does more damage than the average 4.5 times modifier because the chain caps out almost immediately, and then most of the other hits are fully capped. So it may not look like it does the most damage, but it does more damage on average than other 4.5 chaining moves. It puts him in league with people like Sephiroth or like Rayjack or some of these other people who have 4.5 or 5.0 chaining modifier skills. He's not going to be as powerful as units like Titus, who have 7 times modifiers, and it's not going to be very good against multiple targets, but if you have an opportunity where you can take down a single target, this is going to be your go-to move. Now, in my opinion, the more interesting move is his Chaos Object Homing ability. This one is a 2.1x with ignore 50% defense, which means it's effectively a 4.2 times modifier. And the big deal about this one that I feel like most people are kind of glancing over is that this is an AoE damage ability, which means that for physical chainers, he's actually one of the best AoE damage dealers in the game. And the reason for that is anybody who has higher modifiers either have setup turns or they have some other condition that makes them not as desirable. So if you look at Veritas of the Light, she has a higher modifier, but she's a hybrid damage dealer, so it's effectively half the modifier that it would be. Roberta has a higher modifier on her AoE chaining move, but she has to use a setup turn to enable it. And then comparing them to magic AoE chainers would be a little bit apples to oranges. But needless to say, if you're in a pinch for an AoE chainer, he's actually really good for this, and yeah, the other thing that's amazing about it is that he chains with all of the people that I have listed here at the bottom. Olive, well, let me qualify Olive in a second. Prompto, Enhanced Rayjack, Enhanced Roberta, and Sephiroth are all part of a similar chaining family. So Sephiroth, when he equips Masamune, he gets an ability called Octaslash, and he can chain that with Chaos Object Homing. Granted, that one is single target. Roberta has Mystic Thrust, and when you get Mystic Thrust +2, that enables her to chain with Rico as well. If she doesn't do a setup turn, it's a single target attack, and it still chains with him, so if you have only one target that you're attacking, perfect, it still works. If you have an AoE target you need to hit with it, then you can do her setup turn. You could do Rico's breaks or something like that, and that's something that you can see in my video with the two of them against Malboro. Roberta does her Ice Imperil setup move, and then Rico does his Defense and Spirit Break, and then on turn 2 they both jump in together with AoE chaining, and it does a ton of damage. Rayjack with his enhanced, I don't remember what it's called because nobody uses him, but if you have him, it provides a chaining partner that you can use with Rico. Same with Prompto, and Prompto is probably one of the stronger chainers, although the thing that I would have to say about that is that you're going to need a lot of really expensive gear. Like, you would probably need 2 of Olive's guns, one for Prompto and one for Rico, in order to make the build work so that they can lightning chain or whatever. But all of those are chaining partners, and then Olive is the unique one because if you equip Pod 153 to her, she can also perfectly chain with the Mirage chaining move. And the reason why Olive specifically can do this is because her auto attack animation does not make her run towards the boss. And so that means that any other character who also does not have to run towards the boss for their attack animation, like you can see it right here, she just stands there and fires her gun. Any other character that behaves like that, that is also equipped with Pod 153, can also chain with Rico. But Olive is probably the prime example because she's also just a fantastic character in general. So that's kind of an overview of his skills. His other info that you want to be aware of is his Trustmaster reward is awesome. It's very good. It's plus 40 flat attack. So if you're at the 300% attack percentage cap, this is a great way to squeeze out a little bit extra. It also gives the character 25% evasion. So if you're somebody who hasn't had the good fortune of pulling a Noctis TMR, this is a great way to get some extra evasion on your units, especially where evade builds are becoming more prevalent. And then it also has another passive called Insurrection that gives another plus 20% attack to all of the Just Cause 3 units. So that includes Rico, Mario, Annika, and Tio. Most of the time, if you have this TMR, you're just going to use it on Rico, and it is best in slot for him, and it's amazing on him. So great TMR overall. This is probably one of the bigger reasons that you would be happy about pulling for him, is because you can use this TMR a lot. Now, his Limit Burst is actually quite nice. It does a fair amount of damage. It is a moving skill, so you'll see here when I activate it that he has to move a little bit before he activates it. So spark chaining it is actually a little bit tricky. However, the modifiers are good. It does 11 hits, so you can chain it up. You can elemental chain if you've got elemental weapons equipped. Although I will say that this would favor a double hand build, which his kit doesn't really support, so it could be better, but it's still good in case you need it. It's a good way to get an LB kill if you have that as a mission parameter. And now, getting into the equipment that he can use daggers, bows, throwing weapons, guns, and fists. If you're going dual wield, you want guns and fists, obviously. If you're trying to put some variety in your elemental chaining options, you can look into the other weapon categories as well. Or if you wanted to try a double hand build, you could go for like the new dark element bow that we got from, gosh, I can't remember which trial, blanking right now. But you can go for some of those options to explore other builds. You can also equip hats, helmets, clothes, light armor, and heavy armor, and accessories, so he's got some good options there. So if you're like me and you didn't pull any of that dragon guy from the Dragon Quest event that gives the flat 40%, you could equip heavy armor on him and then equip like Sworn 6 Pride Earth or something like that for the 40% attack. It just gives you a lot of options. So from here, let's go into some builds. So when you plug this into the build calculator, plug Rico into the build calculator and say, give me the highest damage possible, it spits out a fixed dice true double hand build. And this build isn't bad, but I personally don't love it. Random damage is the biggest pain to me. If you look at the physical damage on a 100% defense enemy with a one-time skill, the damage variance is huge. You'll either do 20,000 damage at the lowest, or you'll do 120,000 damage at the highest, or close to 130,000 damage. And a lot of times you want control in your fights, and fixed dice is not your friend for that. Alternatively, if you still wanted to do a double hand build because you wanted to do a limit burst chaining or something else like that, you could opt for a two-handed bow or something else two-handed that gives you some damage variance without making the randomness in your damage so ridiculous. So this build is alright. I personally will never ever use it because I hate fixed dice. It doesn't let you control the battle in the same way, but it's there in case you want to see like your highest damage potential. The other reason that this build isn't particularly good for Rico is because he cannot imbue himself with an elemental damage type, so his high-end damage is limited anyways. So either way, not really the most recommended build. Definitely would recommend a different build instead. One of those different builds, and this one is my personal favorite, is his Thunder dual wield build. And now this one does require some high 5-star TMRs, and that's totally fine. We can talk a little bit about how to budgetize this, but the reason this is so good is because Sparky can combine really well with other chainers in the family. So he can use this with Roberta. If Roberta has Thunder Spear, he can use this with Sephiroth if Sephiroth has the Thunder Greatsword. Lots of options. Thunder's an easy element to imperil in a lot of cases, especially if you use an AoE finisher like CG Sakura. Lots of excellent options with Sparky and the Eye Guy on arm, and it really pumps up his attack. 1253 is nothing to sneeze at. It's quite good. Plus he also has 70% evasion with this build because he uses 2 of the Pro Tech grapplers. Now I know that would require you to have 2 Rico, so maybe it's not the most attainable build, but this is probably where you're going to get the most bang for your buck and the most consistent results out of Rico, to be sure. If you wanted to budgetize a build on Rico a little bit, you have a lot of elemental options that you can explore. So this is a build that you can do that doesn't use any 5-star TMRs except for his own, and you can still see he gets very respectable attack, and he can chain with Wind Element. And with the prevalence of units like Lexa or Barbarecia as wind chainers and wind finishers, you can combine those units with Rico Rodriguez and use them to chain and finish, mostly to imperil and finish, and then Rico and a friend Rico can build a chain with a pair of Kaiser Knuckles. And so Romandan Pistol, however you say that, and Kaiser Knuckles are really good picks. They come from 3-star base units. Very easy to get. This is a very attainable build, and it does quite a lot of damage. So I would definitely recommend something like this if you can't get this build here with all of the nice bells and whistles. It doesn't really matter. The other thing that I will make note of that makes Rico incredible is that he has so many different elemental options that he can chain with almost anyone. So if you're fortunate enough to have the right gear for it, of the 8 possible elements that you can chain with, Rico can chain with 7 of them. With light being the only weapon that he doesn't actually have an option for unless you gave him like an equip greatsword materia or something like that. He can innately equip a weapon from 7 of the 8 elements, and he can chain with one of the largest chaining families in the game, which gives him a humongous amount of versatility. So that's something that I wanted to add about him, and that's something that I really like about him, because I know that regardless of what my friend unit is running, I can probably build my Rico so that he can chain with them as long as they've got the same chaining frames. And yeah, not being able to chain with light kind of sucks, but at the same time, like, everybody has light chainers, so who really cares if there's just one more person that he can't chain with? So that is the full recap of Rico, what he can do. You've probably seen my other 2 videos by now of him dealing some damage, and honestly, I think he's massively underrated. If you have somebody who can do AoE on-demand damage, he's going to be your man. He's going to be your man for 10-man trials because you can bring in a friend who can chain with him. He's going to be your man for story events because of that on-demand chaining. He's just very useful, and I think underplayed because he's not what would be considered meta. Like, he doesn't evolve the way that the game is played in any significant way, and he doesn't set a new standard for damage, but he does do super well on his own. So if you've pulled him, don't fret. Like, you've found a good unit, and I'm honestly thinking he might not be bad for 7 stars either if you happen to get 2 of them. So Hopefully that helps clarify some of the questions that people have had about Rico and how good he is and how you can use him. If you have any questions for me, please leave them in the comments. Let me know if you like this video, if you like videos like this one. I spent some time on the presentation, so it's a little neater than Nichol's. If you want to see more videos like this, please let me know. Hit the thumbs up, hit the bell icon. Let me know that this is what you want to see more of, and I'm happy to spend the time to help walk you through the units. If you have a unit in mind that you want to hear more about, that you want to learn how to use effectively, let me know and I will make a guide to help you out. And until that time, I will see you in the next one.